Okay, so this is my clip 2 from critical thinking. So this is still my overview. Couldn't quite squeeze it in the last one. Red herring is number 9 on my list. This is basically a way of you're arguing with someone, and instead of actually dealing with the pertinent issues at hand, okay, you create a distraction by bringing in sort of irrelevant stuff. It's like a diversion. So we'll talk about red herring in more detail. That's a classic one. Number 10 is called Reductio ad Absurdum. And this is basically that you assume a claim to be true. Okay, so for argument's sake, you should pretend it's true, and then show that it leads to some sort of illogical outcome, some sort of illogical conclusion. Absurd, right? The reductio ad absurdum. So it leads to an absurd outcome, and so therefore the original claim must have in fact been false. Okay, I saw something flashing over there on my computer screen. Then on 11 is special pleading. Yeah, this is when we look at evidence only that favors your side of the argument, kind of forget about the other side. And lastly, I'm going to talk about what's called Audiatur et altera pars, which literally means hear the other side. The idea here is that when people make arguments, they can have assumptions, and they don't explicitly state them, and they should. Basically, there are some examples from marketing research about implicit alternatives and implicit assumptions that as an error, as sort of a bad way of creating questions for surveys. And as you should bring them out, make them explicit. So it kind of ties back into our marketing stuff. Okay, so let the games begin, so to speak. So let me walk you through these. So okay, so I've shown you my sources. Sounds good. Okay, so let's go. Number 1 is fallacy of composition. So let me just read to you the definition. It means it is defined as an erroneous view that what is true for the individual or the part will also be true for the group or the whole. Okay, so an example of this is, let's say you're at a baseball game, and let's say a professional baseball game. So you're at the Rogers Center, and let's say, maybe I should use an example where we actually have lots of fans actually go to a game. Because every time I see the Blue Jays players, no one there. So let's use the Raptors as a better example, because they actually have lots of fans. So let's say you're at the Raptors game at the ACC, and you decide to stand up so you can get a better view. Well, that's good for you. But let's say that everyone decides to stand up. Now it's hard for you to see. So you see, what was good for you, the individual, standing up, helps you see better, is no longer a beneficial if everyone does it. It no longer applies to the entire group. That's the whole point. So that if everyone in the group does it, then it sort of undermines the benefit of standing up in the first place. A classic economic example of this sort of fallacy of composition pertains to money. They call this sort of the helicopter Ben kind of argument, named after the current chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, because it alludes to a statement that the economist Milton Friedman made about having helicopter drops of money. So you see, let's say, for instance, that I give you $10,000 and you put that into your bank account. Well, you're better off. So that's good for the individual. But is doing this sort of helicopter drop and flying helicopters across, this, and dropping money and bags of money and giving everyone $10,000, is that also going to mean that everyone's better off? And the answer is no, because now that you've increased the money balances of everyone, the prices are going to be bid up. Okay, I mean, there's the theoretical reason for it is called the quantity theory of money. Right, that says that if you increase money, let's say by 10%, then prices should also go up by 10%. That's the economic reason why it doesn't work. That you will not be richer or better off because you just have more money, more paper, pieces of paper, bills, but they don't buy you anymore. So what's true for the individual by themselves, right, does not hold true for the group. That's the fallacy of composition. I better hurry up because this is going to be like one hell of a long. I'm only at 5 minutes. Okay, so let's go. It's number 2, Petitio Principii. This is by taking for granted something that is disputed and not in evidence. And if you put it in the form of a question, it's called a leading question. So the example that Dr. Fetzer gives in his book would be, let's say you're talking about the O.J. Simpson trial with the murder of Ron and Nicole, right? If you said something like, Mr. Simpson, what made you think your plan would work? Is an example of a leading question, because it's taking the idea that O.J. did it, something that's controversial, something that's being disputed, right? Because that's why we're having the court case, and taking it for granted, saying, oh, you must, it's assuming sort of that he actually did do it, and that's what's still being debated. That's the controversy, right? Another example of this, there's lots of marketing research examples of this I pulled out of the books. Like, for instance, if you ask a question, do you think that patriotic Americans should buy imported automobiles? When doing so will put Americans out of work. Well, of course, if you word it that way, it's a leading question. It's basically, everyone's going to answer, well, of course I wouldn't buy imports because I don't want to put my neighbors out of work, right? So it's biased towards a protectionist answer. Another example of this, right, would be to ask the question, do you see any problems with using your credit card for online purchases? You see, it's already, you've effectively put in something in the question that, do you see something wrong or any problems with using your credit card? It's going to sort of almost induce people to say things are going to be wrong. So it's going to induce you or bias you towards negative answers. And that's why it would be a bad phrasing of a question, right? It's taking it for granted that credit cards are unsafe to use online, right? Which might or might not be true. Okay, let's see if I can ram in appeal of authority in the next 2 minutes. Keep this under 10 minutes. This could be an appeal of authority means you say, Dr. So-and-so said it, so that's why it must be true. This can or cannot be a fallacy. It depends. It is a fallacy if someone who is an authority in one area is cited as an authority in another. And it's not a fallacy if someone who is an authority in an area is cited in relation to that area. So an example of this would be if you cite Einstein on religion, that could be a fallacy because that's not his area of expertise. But if you cite Einstein on physics, then that's probably not a fallacy because that is his area of expertise. Some of the problems with the citing authorities is that the authority might not be representative. So maybe, for instance, you bring in a scientist who says that cigarette smoking is perfectly fine, but that expert works for a tobacco company or something, so that there's a bias towards them to downplay the risks of cigarettes. It also could be possible that there are no experts in the field. It could be an unnecessary argument. For instance, maybe you could get actual observed data or calculations, or direct evidence, because appealing to people is necessarily a weaker form of argument because humans can make mistakes, right? And they're still humans. The classic tagline for this type of argument I took off the internet was, I'm not a doctor, but I play with it on TV, and then it goes on to recommend a certain drug or product. All right, so that's a fallacy as well. On to number 4. Time's up.